And welcome back to the On Your Side Republican State Superintendent debate for public instruction. This next set of questions will be going to all three of our candidates. They're going to hit on some of the most controversial topics in education in the state of Idaho. Once again, we want to remind you of the rules. Each candidate will be allowed 90 seconds to answer the question, and we will set aside some time for rebuttal or follow-up questions from our esteemed panel if necessary. So our first question from the panel tonight, once again from the Idaho Statesman, Bill Roberts.
Governor Otter's Task Force for Improving Education presented 20 recommendations for fixing schools. Some of them include more money for schools, a career ladder for teachers, more autonomy for schools. I would like you to choose one of the 20 and talk to me about its strengths and its weaknesses.
Mr. Jensen, we're going to allow you to answer first on that question.
Well, I'd probably like to tackle the most important one, and that could be the career ladder and teacher licensure. It's very important because in Idaho we have had a hard time recruiting and keeping the very best teachers here, primarily because our teachers are not paid what they should be paid. And so development of this career ladder and the teacher licensure system is critical to the future success of our schools. And so it's so important that all stakeholder groups now continue to work together in developing that career ladder, but most importantly, we need to hold our legislators and our governor responsible for making sure they fully fund those Governor Task Force recommendations. Those recommendations were put together in a cooperative effort, and it's so critical now that we provide the funding to make those happen, especially when it comes to the tiered licensure and the career ladder. It's going to cost a lot of money, but for us to retain and recruit the best teachers for our students, it is really important. Now, the weaknesses is that a lot of details in those. And I sat in a meeting today and watched the committee hash out some of those details, and it's going to be a tough job to make those come together in an effective way where everyone can feel comfortable to support them and provide the funding for them. But I believe here in Idaho, working together, we can make it happen.
Mr. Grover.
Well, I do want to go back to Bill's original comment and say, you know, the 20 recommendations aren't there to fix education. Our education systems are not broken. You know, we are doing some amazing things in the school districts, and our kids haven't ever had it this well or done this well in education. So I don't think the 20 recommendations are there to fix education. I think they've been put into place to help move education forward as we go into the future. So I just want to clarify that part. And I would say the biggest thing on those 20 recommendations that I think is so important is the professional development. You know, our kids are only as good as our teachers that are in the classroom. We have to make sure that teachers have the skills, the knowledge, and the pedagogy to teach their classrooms and to teach their kids and, again, help those students be successful in those classrooms. It's so important that we take the time with our teachers and give them the tools that they need and that are necessary for our teachers to be able to be successful. I think that's the key. I think that's one of the biggest parts of the 20 recommendations, and putting our time into our teachers. We do that every other Friday in Melba. We work on training our teachers, and it's made a huge impact on the academics of our students.
Mrs. Ibarra.
I concur with my opponents in that the first thing you need to do is prioritize those items, and two of the top items would be the career ladders and as well as the professional development. Those are two items that get down to the classroom that affect what we educators call systemic change and get to the most important person in this whole process, and that's that child. Attracting and retaining high quality teachers and giving them the professional development that they need affects that systemic change. I would also like to say, in furthering that conversation, that those are just initiatives. And in order for those to become reality, we need to include our teachers in that and get that down to the level that those folks can understand and get out into the classroom. They are just initiatives until we involve our teachers in that process.
Thank you all. Kevin, your question, please.
Well, let's talk about one of the task force recommendations that none of you mentioned just now, and that's Common Core. A lot of controversy, a lot of consternation about Common Core, but the three of you are basically in the same place as the task force. You support the standards. You've seen them in the field now for a year. You've seen the standards and the assessments in the field for a year. Have you seen anything that has given you pause where you feel like maybe the critics And the skeptics about Common Core have legitimate concerns.
Mr. Grover?
Do you know what the Common Core set of standards, that's what they are. They're a set of standards that were created several years ago, or adopted several years ago by the state legislature, and it's in language, arts, and math. And then each local district gets to choose how they meet those standards. We've been working on the math standards now for over 3 years in our district, and the language arts standards for about 2 years. And so as we've worked on implementing these, part of the biggest issue is working with parents to make sure they understand what the standards mean. But we have to set high standards. Our students deserve the opportunities to be able to reach a high standard and then be able to compete not only at a state level, but between states and even on a global level. So having high standards is the exact direction we need to go, and those Common Core standards, that's what they are. They're a set of standards in language, arts, and math. And the local districts still get to choose how to meet those standards.
Mrs. Ibarra?
You know, as a future doctor by this summer, I have done a lot of research, and that makes me an expert in the field in how students learn. This is good for kids. It is just a set of skills. However, I will tell you that it needs some work. We have just laid the foundation, and we need to continue to build the schoolhouse. And some of the issues that I have noticed in working with that includes the set of skills and raising the standards, but there's nothing in there that speaks to research-based ideas and ways to help students get there if they're not coming into the classroom with that skill already. And so we need to get back to that. Those are some items that I will plan on working with as a future state superintendent of public instruction, is focusing on those items that are weak with a panel of people that are closest to our children, and understanding that there's no research-based method in there for addressing how we acquire those skills.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Mr. Jensen?
Well, it's easy to talk about a lot of the positive things that come with the Common Core standards, but to stick to the question today and talking about maybe something I have concern about, I think the big concern with the Common Core standard is making sure that we take time to do it right. We have trained teachers some. We need to have continual professional development. What Mr. Grover talked about earlier in the importance of professional development. We need to make sure we take our time to help train our teachers the best we can, to help them implement those standards the best that they can, and develop ways to help our students the most. The other thing is, just as we magically raise standards doesn't mean that kids are going to immediately meet those standards. It's going to take time for those standards to work their way up through the system and for kids to meet those higher standards. And so it's going to take time. It's really important that we don't hold students, teachers, or schools accountable on a single test until we make sure that the standards have been given time to be implemented, and especially with the testing of the SBAC test, to make sure that that test is reliable, that it's developmentally responsible, and that it provides really accurate information to teachers. And once again, the key here is making sure we take time to implement them correctly. And I really think that's going to take 3, 4, 5, 6 years. It's not something that can just be done in another year or 2 years.
Panel, do you have a follow-up question when it comes to what Mr. Jensen was just talking about when it comes to the SBAC test? Is there anything you want to know from our candidates about how they feel about the test? Bill?
I do. There is a lot of discussion about the SBAC Smarter Balanced Assessment being used as a graduation test, which would play a significant role in determining whether or not students get a diploma. I'd like to know what you all think about that.
I would like to answer that question. I've done a lot of research in that area, and I feel that that is contributing to our current behavior of testing all kids' grades 3 through 11 when the federal mandate only requires us to test grades 3 through 8 and once at the high school level. If indeed the end of the product is preparing kids for college and career readiness, as your future state superintendent of public instruction, I would question why we are continuing to test all children grades 3 through 11. I would have a plan in place that once you have reached that one grade level at the high school that you're required through the federal mandate, and you have proven that you have acquired those standards, you should finish there. Again, our current practice is taking us down a path towards what are we going to do with the results from the SBAC test. And if it is created to police the standards, that is not in the best interest of our students. I will be the type of leader that taps the brakes in that area and makes sure we are using that information as it is intended to be used.
Gentlemen, do you have a thought on that?
I do. I think that using one test to judge a student isn't fair. I really think accountability should be whole picture. And I think it's important when we look at our students that we look at the total success they've had in school and not base their graduation or success solely on one test. I don't think that's fair for students. I don't believe it's fair for teachers, nor is it fair for a school. Accountability needs to be whole picture. And unfortunately, when we wanted, and I believe in higher standards, and I want all of our students to reach higher standards, but we can't force all students through the same hole. There are square pegs, round pegs, triangular pegs. We need to make sure our education is personalized, and we develop the personal strengths that each student has in helping them succeed so that they can move seamlessly from high school to that next step in their life, whether that's to a job, technical school, or university.
So are you for or against the SBAC?
I like the SBAC test if it provides accurate information for teachers to help students. If its sole purpose is to hold student, teacher, or schools accountable, and it's the only way you're holding them accountable, I'm not in favor of it. I do not like high-stakes testing. But the SBAC test can be good if it's done right.
How's the SBAC testing going in your district, Mr. Grover?
You know what? It has gone very well. We finished actually today with both our elementary and our junior senior high school. We had a few issues in the elementary, and actually it went surprisingly well in our junior senior high. The beauty of this test is that this is a pilot. This is the time that we see what works and what doesn't work. And I think it's really important that we understand that 50% almost of our budget, of Idaho's budget, goes to education, right? And so where we've set a set of standards, we need to be able to assess to see that we're meeting those standards. And so having some kind of assessment in place that meets those standards is important. And as I've worked with superintendents around the state, I'm the Region 3 superintendent president, and I talk to superintendents all over, they're not against having assessments. There's questions on how this assessment's going to work out, and that's why we're doing a pilot, to see what exactly works and what doesn't work. We've been pleasantly surprised in our junior high and high school on how well it's went, and we tested every student. And now we won't get to see that data, but the State Department will, and then they can help make decisions on how that moves forward, and then we can use that data to help us. I think the other thing that's really important to remember here is that there are alternative routes. We have it now. So if a kid does not pass the ISAT or did not pass the ISAT over the past few years, there's different tracks to take those students down that they can meet those same requirements and still graduate, and that has not changed. There are still alternate routes for those students that don't do well on the ISAT, or excuse me, on the SBAC, that will be able to take those students down that route, and they can show proficiency in another way so that it isn't all based on one test.
All right, I'm going to wrap you there because we have more questions coming in from our public as they've been watching our On Your Side Republican State Superintendent debate. Don, you have a question coming in right now. What's that one?
Yeah, we have actually a couple. Hopefully we can get them both in here. Some great questions off of Twitter. This one comes from the High Five Initiative, Fighting Childhood Obesity, who we should say partners with On Your Side. They ask, what are the candidates' stances on fitness, nutrition, and early childhood education and child care?
Mrs. Ibarra, it's your turn to go first.
Thank you. That's a wonderful question. My background in the research is that early childhood education research proves that for every dollar that we spend, we have an $8 return on our investment. Also, that those students are better prepared for school, and they have better language skills. And they need less remediation later on. And however, before we address that, I think that we need to focus on our current system, grades K through 12, and eventually we are going to need to address that. There is no way around it. If it better prepares students for the future, we need to be doing it. The second question relates to child obesity and nutrition. I would like to tell everybody out there that I was one of the first receivers of the Fuel Up to Play 60 grant for my school. And so there is a lot of research also developmentally in how students learn and how that relates to their education and their achievement. It is very important that we have those programs in place because exercise is directly related to pathways in the brain that open up for learning and achievement. So I am a proponent of those items, yes. Thank you.
Mr. Jensen.
I would like to start with talking about obesity and with fitness and say at our school we require students to have a physical education class, or we call it Fitness for Life, all 3 years. Our goal there is to hopefully train our students to have a fitness plan that they've done for 3 years, and so after 3 years it really becomes a part of their life and they'll continue it for the rest of their life. One other important change we made at our school is that we looked at the data and saw that only 18% of our students ate breakfast before school, and we asked why. Why? Because 1, they didn't have time in the morning, 2, maybe they ate breakfast at home, or 3, they didn't like eating that early. So we moved our breakfast to mid-morning at 9:30. Now we have over 80% of our students eat breakfast at school, and what we found with that is that in the classroom before lunch used to be that our most discipline problems happened during that hour. Those discipline problems didn't go down, they went away. The other thing that happened there is that our achievement went up. Typically it dipped right prior to lunch hour. Now our achievement goes up during that hour. So I think there's some things we can do at school that really make a big difference for students. Now, early childhood education, I believe we have to involve parents. I would love to start a Read 20 program where we promote all across the state of Idaho a program that parents spend 20 minutes a day reading with their kids from birth to kindergarten. Because if we can get parents engaged prior to the start of school, instead of having 50% of our kids behind when they start kindergarten, we can have all of our kids at level when they start kindergarten.
Thank you very much. Mr. Grover.
Thank you. That is a great question, all 3 of them actually. And I'll start with the obesity as well. You know, as the federal government has changed the rules on what we can serve at schools, what we found is a lot of our kids now take their money that they used to spend on school lunch and they go down to the local store and buy whatever it is that they want to buy. So I'm not necessarily sure that not having the local control of what we feed our kids in school has really helped us much. You know, so we need to get back to having parents help raise their kids on what they should eat and what they shouldn't eat. You know, just making a federal regulation on then how we have to feed those has not helped the situation. You know, and we all have PE programs. We support those PE programs. And all our kids in my school district go through those PE programs for the same reason. We hope that we do build a healthy lifestyle in our students. You know, early childhood, the research shows that early childhood development is huge, and we need to continue to promote that. We have an every other day, full day kindergarten, and we're seeing the benefits of our students being able to learn to read, and we have our parents working with our students to learn how to read. And it really is a collaboration between parents and the school.
Such big topics that you'd never expect coming out of schools when we start talking about nutrition and obesity and reading by the time you're 2, even at birth. We appreciate all of your comments. We have one more comment, a question coming in. Don, where's this one coming from? Yeah, let's ask this one as well.
I like this one. This is from Bradley on Twitter. What on earth are we going to do to raise salaries for teachers and keep them in Idaho?
Mr. Grover, why don't you take that one?
That's a great question, and one we've dealt with, I think, since education's been around. And we do have an option. We are working on the teacher licensure and the teacher pay ladder that, if put into place, it's an $85 million a year price tag. But what that does is it creates a $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 pay scale for those teachers. And teachers can then earn a respectable wage that represents the profession that they have. And it will help us keep teachers. We still won't be able to compete with maybe all the oil states and those around us, but we'll certainly make it a livable wage and lifestyle here in Idaho. So I think it's important as we move forward, we work with the legislators and teachers, you know, and the different groups, and make sure that we can implement and fully fund that teacher's ladder to get those dollars up to a livable wage.
Mrs. Ibarra.
We are on our way to attracting and retaining high-quality teachers, and I believe that is one of the initiatives that we need to continue to work on. That is one of those items, again, that addresses the whole child. It's part of my platform as a future superintendent of public instruction and affects that systemic change. And what I mean by systemic change is how we get that change down to the classroom. Every child deserves a highly qualified, highly trained professional in their classroom. And so we are on the right track and we have the capability, and we need to just keep thinking about the future and the fact that if we cannot afford it now, we will pay for it later.
Mr. Jensen.
You know, I have an excellent teacher at my school right now. His name is Jake Foster. He teaches 6th grade science. The kids love him. He's an excellent teacher. He integrates technology. He works with other disciplines and other teachers. He's a great team member. But he's quitting this year after 5 years of teaching because he has stayed at the same salary now for 5 years at $31,000. He's going back to college to further not his education profession. He's going back to become a physician's assistant because he hasn't even been able to pay off his student loans. It's critical that we raise our teacher salaries and we pay them a fair wage. I think I discussed that earlier, and I think we're on the path of doing that, but it's crucial that we make sure we guarantee the funding necessary to implement the pay changes for Idaho teachers.
If I gave you a magic wand, how much would you give them tonight?
Well, I like the salary schedule they're proposing now at $40,000 to $60,000. Unfortunately, it's going to take us 5 or 6 years to get there, but I would love to be able to tell a beginning teacher that you can make $40,000, and in 9 or 10 years of really solid service, you can be up to $60,000 as you become a master teacher.
The hot topics just keep coming. Coming up next, our panelists will be asking specific questions direct to our candidates. It's something you're not going to want to miss. You're watching the On Your Side Republican State Superintendent Debate.